Howdy, I'm Grey Pilgrim. Well, this is take two. Let's see if this SD card works. The other one seemed to have gone crazy. Recently I was watching Jake of Everything Black Powder, a channel I really respect and a fellow who I've followed religiously for years now because he just comes up with some wonderful, wonderful content. I make, what does he call it? I forget, but he's got a special term for the particular kind of propellant that he makes. And I've used his recipe and it works like a champ. Much better than my earlier ones. I even tried making some with stalks from a rose once, and that came out pretty darn good. But usually I use Douglas fir, which is not, I did not recommend it because it does work. It makes adequate black powder, but it's very, very dirty. But anyway, he was recently doing a video about the Starr double action. Well, I have a Starr. Mine's a single action. What's the difference? Well, the original Starr was double action. And then the War Department got a lot of complaints from folks who were using it who said that they got really tired of that double action trigger system that they used. You see, what the Starr did is right here where the trigger is, there's a little divot, a little tip that stuck out from the action behind the trigger. And there was a little lever that you could push down on this main trigger so that when you cock it, it would contact that other little trigger, and then if you cock it and then fire, it would work single action. But it was a brutal trigger pull. And then if you did it double action, you could also just fire it double action. But it was an even more brutal trigger pull. So people were saying, I'd prefer not to use a Starr, and even the Confederates used to not pick them up off the battlefield because they didn't like them. I've noticed, well, what happened was the War Department in 1863 went to Starr and said, can you make these only make them single action only, just like the Remingtons, just like the Colts? And he did. And this is an 1863 Starr, and it's a single action. And it works like a champ. I think this is one of the better pistols used, or revolvers used, in the Civil War. I was in the comments on his channel. I was following a comment there where a fellow said that it was the best double or best black powder cap and ball pistol of all time. And I said, well, no, it is the best one of the Civil War. But the best of all time is the Rogers and Spencer. Now, this is a Euro Arms clone of it, but it is just like the original. And I think that it's just a wonderful, wonderful pistol, or revolver. I'll say pistol instead of revolver because they did at the time. Though it never fought in the Civil War. What happened was Rogers and Spencer's, like many other manufacturers at the time, had come up with a design for a revolver. This was I forget who they got making it, but it's basically a takeoff on the Whitneyville. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, well-made machine. Good steel, good action, beautiful trigger. Well, they've got the first bunch of them over to the War Department. They said, hey, great, get us the rest. And they're working on the next shipment when peace broke out. Appomattox was signed and the war was over. And then immediately the War Department went out and said, cancel all contracts, we're going broke. So they tried to cancel all contracts. Well, Rogers and Spencer said, hey, this is in the works, and we've already invested a whole bunch into this, and you owe us. And they said, well, all right, for you, we'll make a special exception. So they finished that last load and sent it off to the War Department, got their check. And the War Department grabbed all of these things with the war over, and they just basically shoved them into a crate and stored them in a warehouse somewhere. And they were stored in that warehouse for something like, I don't know, 40 years or so. And then one day they decided to sell off all of their surplus. And these were sold at auction, and a fellow named Francis Bannerman bought them. You may have heard of Bannerman. He was a great marketer of surplus war materials. Well, he put these in his catalog and sold them for pennies on the dollar, basically. At the time, of course, Smith and Colt and everybody by the 1870s were hot and bothered over the new bored-through cylinders and cartridge revolvers and stuff. But this thing, this Rogers and Spencer, well, it was dirt cheap compared to those fancy new ones. And a cowboy or a settler or anybody out in the West, you know, he'd look at that and he'd think, you know, this is something that I can afford. And I can get powder. Powder comes usually came in a case that was packed with lead. So you could then melt down that lead and cast your own balls and go down to the mercantile and get yourself some primers. And you've got a good enough sidearm that you could actually use. So it's a good revolver. And I think it's the best ever made cap and ball revolver. Just my own opinion. You know, I do love the Starr, and of the Civil War ones, I think this is the best. Not the double action, the single action, because the trigger pull on this is a dream. And I do see Jake had one gripe, and that's that where these nipples or cones are, there's nothing in between. There's nothing to block them one from the next. So there is the potential of chain fire. He demonstrated that on his video. I would recommend watching his video. It's great. But the thing about the double action system on the Starr itself, that was used by other people. And let me give you an example. This is an Ivor Johnson. It's a .38 Smith & Wesson. It's a cheap throwaway revolver that was used. I think they called these Saturday night specials. It was quite popular at the turn of the last century. But if you take a close look, there's a little tit that sticks up. Where I put my little, oh, there it is. There's a little tit right here behind the trigger. And what it's for is when you cock it, the trigger goes right up against it, and that fires the, when you pull on it, it fires the weapon. And I can demonstrate that by taking a little pin and putting it in here between the trigger and this gizmo and pushing up on it, and it fires. And I did not touch that trigger at all. The trigger here is just a cocking device. This is the actual trigger back here, which is exactly the way the Starr worked. But in this system, it works a little better. I mean, it's because it's just an easier pistol to shoot. It's still a hard pistol in double action, but it does work. But I just wanted to mention that as the other pistols did indeed use that particular system. Smith & Wesson, I don't think Fordham used them, and I don't think that Hopkins and Allen did, but Ivor Johnson did. So just thought I'd mention it. Anyway, but back to the black powder. These guys are just a wonderful, wonderful invention, in my opinion. But this, in my opinion, is the best cap and ball revolver ever developed. Just my opinion. Happy trails.